Today, we are going to be looking at Revelation chapters 17 and 18, and we're going to be looking at the rise and fall of Mystery Babylon. So why don't you follow along with me, beginning in verse 1. It says, "Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and talked with me, saying to me, 'Come, and I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine of her fornication.' So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, and having in her hand a cup full of the abominations and the filthiness of her fornication. And on her head a name was written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and the abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I marveled with great amazement." Pause there and give me your attention. There was a private school up in Washington, true story, that was having a little bit of a problem. You see, there were these middle school girls, 12-year-old girls, who all started using lipstick about the same time. And so they'd go into the bathroom of this school and they'd put on their lipstick, which was fine, nothing wrong with women wearing makeup and lipstick. But then before they would leave the bathroom, they would go up to the mirror, looking at themselves in the mirror, and they'd go and kiss the mirror, leaving all of these lipstick marks on the mirror. And so every night the janitor's coming in and he's got to clean all the lipstick off the mirrors. And they were doing this every single day. And so the janitor was just like perplexed, like, come on. Went to the principal, he said, "You've got to do something. You just have to do something here." And so the principal gathered all the little 12-year-old girls into the bathroom and said, "Girls, this is really becoming a problem. You guys got to quit doing this. I mean, it's really a lot of work for the janitor." And he asked the janitor to come in there as well. And he said, "I just want you to see what he has to go through to clean the bathroom mirror every single day when you keep kissing it and leaving all these marks." And so the janitor takes out a long squeegee, dips it in the toilet, and then comes up and washes the mirror. There were no more lipstick marks on the mirror after that. And the point of that story is this. When we get the straight scoop on how things happen, it has a way of altering our lives. Well, the book of Revelation gives us the straight scoop on what is going to be happening in our world in the last days. And it too is very, very shocking. Revelation chapters 17 and 8 is another one of those parenthetical sections of the book of Revelation. And it might have been easier for us to just go from, chapter 16 right to chapter 19, where we're looking at Armageddon, and we go right to, the picture there of Jesus coming back. But Jesus finds it crucial to notify us of another judgment that will come down during that timeline. And back in chapter 13, we were given some detail into that system of government that the Antichrist will set up in the last days. And we talked there a bit about the 7 heads and the 10 horns. And here in chapter 17, it gives us some further insights into this powerful expression of human wealth and human authority and human influence that will be alive on planet Earth in the last days. This system of government that is referred to here as Mystery Babylon. And it also gives us, these two chapters do, insight into its destruction. Now, most premillennial scholars agree that Mystery Babylon represents the twofold system of world dominance that will be put in place in the final 7 years of the tribulation period. And there's a spiritual or a religious system that dominates the globe, and it's intrinsically tied to an economic system, a commercial and economic system. And these systems ride on the power and the political system of the beast that we know as the Antichrist. And until the Antichrist and his coalition of 10 nations, we'll see this tonight, force the system of Babylon to bow to its authority, at which point the Antichrist will make him the center of all humanity's worship and the center of the world's economic system, where buying and selling, we saw this in chapter 13, cannot happen unless you have his mark. So when we talk about Mystery Babylon, I think the best way to understand it, it's not really talking about a place or necessarily a literal city, but it's talking about a system that has its origins in ancient Babylon. And so I want to look at, first of all, tonight, what we could call Babylon historically, and just a little history lesson here. In Genesis chapter 10, we read of what took place about 4 generations after the flood. It happened that a mighty leader by the name of Nimrod established a kingdom in the region of Babylon, which today is modern-day Iraq. And it had one language amongst a united human race. And Nimrod and his followers were determined to build a tower that would reach into the heavens. And the whole purpose of this was to demonstrate the power of a united human race. And the effort was to move in defiance toward God, the God of heaven and his authority. I'll put it on the screen, but in Genesis 11, verse 4, this is what they said. Come, let us, note this, let us build ourselves a city and a tower whose top is in the heavens, and let us, there it is again, make a name for what? Ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth. That was their focus. Let's do this. Let's make a name for ourselves. Let's glorify ourselves. Let's build this tower into the heavens. Now, Nimrod's name literally means we shall rebel. And Nimrod's message to humanity was that mankind doesn't need God. That mankind can be his own God, that mankind can overcome God through their knowledge, their strength, and their ingenuity. And it's really, really interesting that the Bible tells us that the tower that they created was insulated with pitch. And what's ironic about that is pitch is the very same material that God instructed Moses to build the ark with, to keep it from flooding or to keep it from sinking, to make it waterproof. And so they also built this tower high into the heavens, and perhaps as a statement that no matter how high you bring the waters next time, God, our tower is going to stand. Nimrod was confident that no flood from God would be able to destroy his work. Now, many of you know the story, though, of what happened there. God saw their work and how quickly they would be willing to expel God from their thinking, to push God, out of their lives. So he confused their language. And consequently, the people, he scattered the people throughout the whole world, and the region of this split became known as the region of Babel, and later became known as the Empire of Babylon. And Babel and Babylon come from the same Hebrew root word, which means confusion by mixing. Now, the ancient city of Babylon is mentioned 287 times in Scripture, and it really reached the zenith of its power under the reign of King Nebuchadnezzar. And King Nebuchadnezzar was a brilliant guy. And here's one of the things that made him so brilliant. This was his plan of indoctrination. When he would go into an ancient city and besiege it, instead of just destroying the whole city and enslaving all of the people, he gave his commanders these instructions. He would say, go into the city and take the best looking people that you can find. Take the brightest people that you can find and bring them back to our capital city, Babylon. And so Nebuchadnezzar had this habit of importing the prettiest people in the world and the smartest people in the world into his capital city. And then he would take these people and he would put them through a 3-year training program where he would, catch this, slowly strip away all of their culture, the culture that they came out of, and he would replace it with the Babylonian culture. We actually see this played out in the book of Daniel. We know that Daniel and his 3 friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, were a part of a group of probably somewhere between 50 to 75, 15 to 18-year-old young men that were carted off to Babylon to be a part. They were some of the brightest and the best-looking young men, and he brought them there to Babylon. 1,500 miles they traveled through the desert. And he was going to put them through this 3-year training program where they would be living large. I mean, they would be living in the palace and they would be eating off the king's table. But get this, hear me on this, their schooling was not so much to inform them in the customs and cultures of Babylon, but it was to form them. It was to shape them. It was a slow indoctrination into the Babylonian mindset. And the whole process was meant to wear down their resistance and to weaken their resolve and to slowly strip away their attachment to their homeland, to their heritage, to their religion, and to their God. One of the things that they did was they changed their names. They took their Jewish names and replaced it with Babylonian names. Daniel, whose name means God is judge, was changed to Belteshazzar, which means Baal, the god Baal protects. Hananiah, whose name means God is gracious, was changed to Shadrach, which means illumined by the sun god. Mishael, whose name means like the Lord, becomes Meshach. In other words, who is Shach, the goddess of love and sex? And Azariah, whose name means the Lord is our help, is changed to Abednego, meaning the servant of Nego, the god of wisdom. Now, here's what's interesting about that. Here's what's interesting about that whole mindset, that whole approach of Nebuchadnezzar. It was really, in all respects, it was a brilliant plan. Because he got these young men from all over the world, and he'd bring them in and he'd train them, and then he would have them oversee the people that he captured. Oversee their own people, and they would train them in the ways. But what's interesting about that whole system is we are living right now in a Babylonian culture. We are living in a Babylonian culture, listen to me, that has been seeking to indoctrinate us for years. It's been seeking to change our mindset and weaken our resolve. And it wants to get us to forget our identity of who we are in Christ. And our culture's indoctrination has changed from being a slow, subtle indoctrination to today it's a rapid, in-your-face indoctrination that says you better accept the way that we are thinking and wanting you to think, or you're going to be canceled. You better accept the way that we are thinking and teaching you, or you're going to be ostracized. We live in a culture where the lines are being drawn, my friends. During the tribulation, that Babylonian culture and mindset is going to be on steroids. I want you to notice in our text, the mystery of Babylon is described here as a woman. And I want us to note 5 things about this woman. The first is that she had great influence. Notice in verse 1, it says that she sits on many waters. And in verse 15, it tells us exactly what that means. Notice, he says, "Then he said to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues." The idea is that this system of belief will have influence over many people and many nations all around the world. This system of belief, you could call it a religious system. It was Karl Marx who declared religion is the opium of the people. And I want you to note that I said religion, not Christianity, because there is a vast difference between the two. You see, religion is all about what I can do for God. Christianity is about what God has done for us. Religion seeks to teach us how to reach up to God, and Christianity teaches that God reached down to us in the sending of his son, Jesus. Religion is all about human effort, but Christianity is a gift from God. Religion appeals to our flesh. The idea of, I can do this, and I earn this, and I made my way. That's what religion teaches us, but Christianity appeals to our hearts. That God did something that we couldn't do for ourselves. That God made a way that we couldn't make for ourselves. Religion is the opium of the people. It is a self-deluding narcotic. And in the last days, this narcotic is going to spread to the masses. But we've already seen traces of it right now. We see it right now in our day and age in the modern self-help movement, where there's this great emphasis on improving yourself. Make yourself a better you. And that whole mentality has crept its way into the church. It's seen in this type of phraseology. Hey, let's create your best life now. That's part of that whole mindset of that self. And I think what it's doing is it's preparing people for this whole thing that the Antichrist is going to bring on the scene. That's going to be all about how hey, we can improve you. We can make you a better you. It's seen, I think, even in the rise of influencers today. A few years ago, none of us even knew what that meant. Somebody says, "So what do you do for a living?" "I'm an influencer." Like, what the heck is that? What do you mean? You get paid for that? But it's true. People making millions of dollars, and what they do is they go on social media and they pitch these products and they'll say, "Hey, this makes me happy. This makes me look the way that I do. And if you buy this, then you can look like me and be happy too." And they pitch these things, and people are paying them millions of dollars. But so much of it is this overemphasis on self and self-focus. What do we call those things that we do with our phones where we take a picture of ourselves? What do we call it? Selfie, And it's all that mindset of, and I'm not downplaying that. I like to take pictures with my wife and post that picture with my grandkids, but it's just the whole concept of it. Like, who came up with that terminology? Selfie, it's so interesting to me. But this is the mindset. This is that Babylonian system. Notice also that this woman, Mystery Babylon, she has ties with world leaders. Look at verse 2. It says, "With whom the kings of the earth committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine of her fornication." And the idea there is just speaking of it being joined to her. The world religion not only has a far-reaching popularity and influence, but it also has ties with many world leaders at that time. Look at verse 18. It says, "And the woman whom you saw is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth." She's got not just about influence, but she also has power. And there was a time in church history where that was not uncommon. I'm speaking when I say of church history, really in the Roman Catholic Church. There are stories like those of King Charles of France, who the Pope made wait outside in the snow for hours waiting to talk to him. Imagine that. A king waiting out in the snow for hours to talk to the Pope. But the reason why the Pope could do that, because the Pope had the power to excommunicate him from the church. And so that was a big deal to, the kings in France and kings in England. And so the religious world of the popes, they held that power over them. And it seems that this system that is going to be set up is going to have a similar power. That, hey, if you don't toe the line, we can kick you out of our group, is sort of the idea. Her power comes from the beast. Notice verse 3, that so he carried me away in the spirit, John says, into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. We'll come back to that description in a few minutes, but notice that she's sitting on the beast. She's riding the beast. The third thing that we see about her is that she's successful at her trade. In verse 4, the woman is arrayed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls. She's not dressed in rags. She's not dressed in, Walmart blue light specials. No, she has on beautiful purple and scarlet garments that speak of royalty. She's adorned with gold and pearls and precious stones that all speak of her wealth. It all speaks of her doing really, really well in her influence, and monetarily, she's highly successful, this system. But underneath all the beauty and the wealth and influence is a dark side. Notice verse 4. The second part, it says, and having in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the filthiness of her fornication. Oh, she looks like she's, really something on the outside. This system, it's dressed up, it looks good, it's got great power, great buildings, and it looks wonderful, but the heart behind it is full of wickedness and filthiness. And then notice number 4, it says she's the mother of harlots in verse 5. It says, and on her forehead a name was written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and the abominations of the earth. This final world system is not something new, friends. The mother of them all, it says. We need to understand this if we're going to understand chapter 17, that the idea of Mystery Babylon, this religion, is not something new that Satan is going to come up with in the last days. Did you know that Satan doesn't really have any new strategies? He's been doing he's playing the same song over and over again since he tempted Eve. Same thing he does. He appeals, he wants us to doubt God, doubt his heart, doubt his existence, doubt his provision, and he wants to seek to get us to please himself. And he's been playing that same tune, and it's like a one-hit wonder, and people just keep falling for it over and over and over again. And they're going to do this, and it's the culmination that this Mystery Babylon is the culmination of the lies that Satan has been feeding humanity throughout the generations. And ancient Babylon became a symbol of human spiritual confusion by the mixing of truth with error, leading to spiritual adultery. These are some of the religions that have been birthed out of the Babylonian mindset: Confucianism, Buddhism, Hinduism, shamanism, Taoism, mysticism, astronomy, witchcraft, spiritism, Sikhism, and all of the world's vast concepts of many gods. All of that has been birthed out of this Babylonian mindset and this Babylonian world. The fifth thing that we see, though, about this Mystery Babylon is that she is vicious toward those who oppose her. Look at verse 6. I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I marveled with great amazement. Now, this would be a reference to those men and women who are going to get saved during the tribulation. And there will be many. There's going to be many people who they'll miss the rapture and they're going to come to Christ during the tribulation time. And they're going to be martyred for their faith. And notice that this system is playing a big part in hunting them down, opposing, coming against all who oppose her, all who will not bow down to her system. And again, we're seeing this today in our world right now. We're seeing the beginning stages of this. Truth is being twisted. And God's word is being pushed out of our society. It's being pushed out of popular thought. You know, we started as a Christian nation. We started as a group of people who, put on our money in God we trust. What a joke that is today. People trust in their money. They trust in their power. They don't trust in God. We formed the Declaration of Independence. We formed, when people talk about that whole debate about the church and the state, the idea was never, you can read the documents, go back and read it. The idea was never, ever to keep the church out of the state. The purpose of it was to keep the state out of the church. Because the focus was, this is the foundation. You can read, so many of our founding fathers were men who, not perfect men, but they loved God. They're men who studied the Word of God. But today, man, if you don't buy into the mindset of the system of this world, like I said before, you'll be canceled. You'll be ostracized. In some countries today, if you say that homosexuality is a sin, you can be put in prison. It's crazy. Today in the U.S., if you say something like that, you can lose your job. Maybe you saw this recently, that Samantha Ponder, who is a Christian, and she was the host of a very popular show called Sunday NFL Countdown, which was coming off its best rating year ever last year, gearing up for this year's NFL season. She was fired last week by ESPN over her remarks about fairness in women's sports. Ponder was among a small group of sports reporters who have publicly called for fairness in women's sports amid the ongoing debate over transgender inclusion. She said this, "Call me whatever names you want, but it doesn't change the fact that it is inherently unfair for biological males to compete in female sports." Well, the higher-ups at ESPN didn't like that, and they fired her. Sad. She was shown the door. Well, during the tribulation, that type of animosity toward the people who don't go along with their system and ideology is going to go to new levels. Notice John's reaction, though, to what he's seeing. The end of verse 6, he says, "And when I saw her, I marveled with great amazement." As John looks at this woman representing this system, he is just blown away by all that she represents. He's just blown away by the immorality. He's blown away by the wickedness. He's blown away by the power that she holds. But notice verse 7 says, "But the angel said to me, 'Why did you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns. And so that brings us to consider the second thing here is how Mystery Babylon is destroyed. We've seen its rise, now we see its fall, beginning in verse 8. "The beast that you saw was and is not, and will ascend out of the bottomless pit and go to perdition. And those who dwell on the earth will marvel, whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world. When they see the beast that was and is not and yet is, And here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. And there are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue for a short time. The beast that was and is not is himself also the 8th, and is of the 7, and is going to perdition. The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings, which received no kingdom as yet, but they receive authority for 1 hour as kings with the beast. These are of one mind, and they will give their power and the authority to the beast. And these will make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them, for he is the Lord of lords and the King of kings, and those who are with him are called chosen and faithful. Pause right there for a minute. Notice this woman, this harlot, is not seen by herself, but she's seen riding the beast. And we've noted the beast is the Antichrist. But remember, we talked about this back in chapter 13, that the Antichrist doesn't just speak of an individual who will come on the scene and come into power in the last days, but it speaks of his whole kingdom. It speaks of his whole system of governance that he sets into motion. And notice verse 9, again, it says, here's the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. These are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue for a short time. The beast that was and is not is himself also the 8th, and is of the 7, and is going to perdition. Now that's perfectly clear, right? You remember earlier, if you were with us in chapter 13, we saw this same picture, that the 7 heads describe this beast. Many scholars believe that these are 7 kingdoms, that they literally make up the 7 world powers that have ruled the earth since the time of the birth and the creation of the nation of Israel. So those nations would be Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, Greece. So those are the 5 that have passed that John mentions in verse 10. 5 have fallen. And then he says, and 1 is. Well, the 1 is would be Rome. Rome was the one who was in power during when John was writing the book of Revelation. So that's the 1 that is. And then it says, and the other has not yet come. That's the 7th. And many scholars believe that the 7th kingdom will really be a reemergence of the Roman Empire in some way, shape, or form. But it will also include the characteristics of all of these other nations that have come before, in that it will be strong and powerful like Egypt, Assyria, and Babylon, who are the world powers of its time. It'll be cunning and ferocious like Persia was as a ruling power, and it will move swift in coming into power like Greece under Alexander the Great, that conquered the nations of the world in the quickest amount of time, and it will rule with an iron fist like that of Rome. But notice that its reign isn't long. Notice it says, and when he comes, he must continue for a short time. Now, what's interesting is there seems to be something that happens to the beast that brings him into power and popularity in this 7th kingdom. Notice verse 11 again. It says, the beast that was and is not is himself also the 8th, and is of the 7, and is going to perdition. From this, it seems that this political system forms first, and that the Antichrist is just one of the leaders in it. But then something happens. Again, notice the language. The beast that was and is not is himself also the 8th. And if you remember, back in Revelation chapter 13, we read this. I think it'll be on the screen. If not, just listen. I'll read it to you. This was Revelation 13:3. It says, and I saw one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world marveled and followed the beast. Remember we talked about that? Remember, we talked about how it seems, the indication is that there's going to be an assassination attempt upon this leader's life. He's going to be wounded. And he's going to be wounded to the point that most people are going to think that he died. Like it's going to be just looking, maybe the news reports are just going to be like, wow, I mean, he's gone, he's dead. And maybe that's going to be the word that goes out at first, but then he's going to have some sort of a resurrection. I think it's going to be a whole thing Satan is, seeking to put together, because Satan is so great at counterfeiting. He's so great at masquerading. And what he's seeking to do, I think, in this is to, have a counterfeit resurrection, but it works. Because we read that there in chapter 13, verse 3, that the world marvels. They marvel at his supposed resurrection, and they followed the beast. The world is going to be mesmerized by this, and they're going to marvel. And they're going to pledge their allegiance. And this is how he comes into power. This is how he becomes that world ruler. And so this woman, this harlot, this false religious system is riding the beast, riding the Antichrist, riding the kingdom that he rules. And the Antichrist is going to use the woman. He's going to use this world system to gain popularity. But in reality, they use each other. She's using him, she's using the other kings, they're using her to find their prominence on the world scene. But what happens next is interesting. Look at verse 12. The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have received no kingdom as yet. That power, that 8th kingdom or that 7th kingdom isn't in power as yet, but they receive authority for 1 hour. As kings with the beast. They're leaders with the beast. These are of one mind, and they will give their power and authority to the beast. When the final beast reigns as an extension of the 6 previous empires that come before, he'll reign with 10 other kings and kingdoms. But these 10 other kingdoms are willingly going to subject themselves to him. These are the 10 horns. In fact, in the book of Daniel, he gives us a little more insights into this, that the 10 horns exist, and the Antichrist literally comes up as an 11th horn in that picture. So he comes up as an 11th horn, and then he subdues the other 10. So he becomes the leader of them. And I believe the 10 main world powers will be clearly established prior to the coming of the Antichrist. Now, some people ask, could this be the European Union? Or some form of the European Union that's in existence today? Maybe. It's interesting, you can look this up, that the 2 cents of the EU coin, on the back of it, the symbol of it is a woman riding a beast. Kind of interesting, right? Now, to them, it's the ancient Greek goddess Europa riding Zeus, but it's interesting, it's the same imagery that John uses here. And another thing that's really, really interesting is the EU Parliament building bears a striking resemblance to artist renditions of the Tower of Babel. Look it up. I actually had 2 pictures. I forgot to send them to our media team that I wanted you to see them side by side because it's eerie how similar they look. And the EU Parliament building is called, they call it the Unfinished Tower. Isn't that crazy? And on a poster made of the building by the institutions featured this slogan, Europe, many tongues, one voice. That's their focus. So who knows? The EU and the World Economic Forum might not be the 7th empire, but it indeed operates today in the spirit of Babylon. And I would say, at the very least, it's a step in that direction. But I want you to notice that in alignment with the Antichrist, these kings share their disdain for Jesus. Verse 14, these kings will make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them. For he is the Lord of lords and the King of kings, and those who are with him are called, chosen, and faithful. And this is another passage pointing towards what we've looked at already, that battle of Armageddon, the Antichrist bringing these kings, getting all these nations, this false prophet, that we talked about this, a couple of weeks ago, the demons speaking in their ear and go to Megiddo, and they go where they're going to be destroyed. But here's what's interesting. After the rulers and the Antichrist use the woman and her system to get the power that they want, they discard her. They have no more use for her. And the Antichrist is going to be advocating for the world to worship him, in which they will indirectly, when the world starts worshiping the Antichrist, they're going to be indirectly worshiping Satan, which is what he's always wanted all along. And he's going to get it through that way. But notice verse 17. It says, "For God has put it into their hearts to fulfill his purpose, to be of one mind and to give their kingdom to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman you saw is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth." I actually skipped verses 15 and 16. I just realized that. Did you realize that? Notice it. It says, "Then he said to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits," this is when they turn on her, "are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. And the 10 horns which you saw on the beast, these will hate the harlot and make her desolate and eat her flesh and burn her with fire." So when they've used her to get what they want, they discard her. And it's exactly what the Antichrist wants, because when they stop worshiping this system, they worship him. But again, this is what I wanted to see in verse 17. But God says, I put it into their hearts to fulfill this purpose. People ask, where's God in all of this? Where's God in all this crazy things we've been seeing? He's right there. He's right there. He's orchestrating all of this. He put it in their hearts to execute his purpose. You see, even the powers of evil serve the purposes of God. That's the point of chapter 17. That's one of the points of the book of Revelation. The powers of evil are being used to carry out the purposes of God. His wrath being poured out on a rebellious world. Now, Chuck Swindoll, in his study of Revelation 17, he ended it with 3 insights that I thought were really, really good. 3 important truths. The first was the truth about religious activity. Religious activity feels full and alive, but it's empty and dead. There's a lot of religious people who are dead because they don't know God. And the Bible says anybody who doesn't know God, they're dead in their trespasses and sins. Second truth, the truth about Satan's strategy. It appears impressive and effective, but it's evil and deceptive. And Satan's so good at masquerading, comes as an angel of light. It's impressive. A lot of things, a lot of signs, wonders, a lot of things that are going to happen in the tribulation are going to be impressive. But the heart of it is evil and deceptive. And the third truth he pointed out is the truth about God's sovereignty. That God may seem absent and uninvolved, but he is actually present and engaged. And all through this, God's never left. He's never taken his hand off of the control knob. He's working all things to fulfill his ultimate purpose in the world. And so we see here in chapter 17, the rise and fall of Mystery Babylon. I want us to quickly look at man's reaction to her fall now in chapter 18. And we're going to see 3 things. We'll see, first of all, that her judgment is declared. Look at verse 1. "After these things I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority. And the earth was illumined with glory. And he cried mightily with a loud voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and has become a dwelling place of demons, and a prison for every foul spirit, and a cage for every unclean and hated bird. For all the nations have drunk the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich through the abundance of her luxury. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, and lest you receive of her plagues. For her sins have reached to heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Render to her just as she rendered to you, and repay her double according to her works, in the cup of which she has mixed with double for her. In the measure that she glorified herself and lived luxuriously, in the same measure give her torment and sorrow. For she says in her heart, I sit as a queen and am no widow, and will not see sorrow. Therefore her plagues will come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she will be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord God who judges her. Now, whether this was referring to an actual city of Babylon, modern-day Iraq, which some believe will become the headquarters of this system in the tribulation time, scholars are kind of really divided on this. But it is interesting, and I point that out because in Jeremiah chapter 51, it talks about the literal city of Babylon being destroyed in a moment, never to be inhabited again. And that has never happened prophetically. That hasn't happened yet. Iraq has been beaten down many times, but it keeps building itself back up again. So sometime, at least as pertains, I think, to Iraq, it's going to be destroyed and never built again. It might be pertaining to the system, maybe not. But wherever it's located, God pronounces judgment on this world system. And I want you to notice two things. First of all, the judgment is swift. We're told in verse 10 that it happens in an hour. For in 1 hour your judgment has come. It's repeated again in verse 17. For in 1 hour such great riches come to nothing. All this grandeur, suddenly it's gone. And again in verse 19. For in 1 hour she is made desolate. It's swift and it's severe. Notice verses 6 through 8 again. God says, render to her just as she rendered to you, and repay her double according to her works. In the cup which she has mix double for her. God says, look, because of what she has done and the way that she has done it, let's pour out upon her a double portion of my wrath. And so we see here her destruction is declared. The second thing I want you to notice is the despair of the world. And I think this is crazy. Look at verse 9. The kings of the earth who committed fornication and lived luxuriously with her will weep and lament for her when they see the smoke of her burning, standing at a distance for fear of her torment, saying, Alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour your judgment has come. And the merchants of the earth will weep and mourn for her, for no one buys their merchandise anymore. And merchandise of gold and silver and precious stones and pearls and fine linen and purple silk and scarlet and every kind of citron wood and every kind of object of ivory and every kind of object of the most precious wood and bronze and iron and marble and the cinnamon and the incense and the fragrant oils and the essential oils. And I just threw that in there. So I wanted to see if you're paying attention. And the frankincense and the wine and the oil and the fine and the flour and the wheat and the cattle and the sheep and the horses and the chariots and the bodies and the souls of men. And the fruit that your soul longed for has gone from you. And all the things which are rich and splendid have gone from you, and you shall find them no more at all. Verse 15, and the merchants of these things who became rich by her will stand at a distance for fear of her torment and weeping and wailing and saying, alas, alas, the great city that was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls. For in 1 hour great riches came to nothing, and every shipmaster and all who travel by ship and sailors and all many as trade on the sea stood at a distance, and they cried out when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, what is like this great city? This is amazing to me. And I want you to see this. The people of the world are not mourning for the loss of life. They're mourning for the loss of income. Isn't that crazy? They're not mourning that thousands, tens of thousands maybe, who knows, people have died. They're mourning because they're not going to enjoy and benefit from her wealth, and they're not going to enjoy her pleasures anymore. It would be like this. It would be like, picture North County Fair on Black Friday. Thousands and thousands of people there shopping. And we have another 9/11, and the whole mall gets obliterated. Thousands of people die. And people are out in the parking lot and they're crying. I can't shop at Macy's anymore. I can't eat at my favorite restaurant. That's like what that means. This to me, it just shows the level to which mankind will have descended at this point. The ultimate display of the what's in it for me mentality that shows no regard for other human beings. It's a dog-eat-dog world to the extreme. And so that's the despair of the world. But let's finish with the delight of heaven. Notice verse 20. Rejoice over her, O heaven, and you holy apostles and prophets, for God has avenged you on her. And then a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, thus with violence the great city of Babylon shall be thrown down and shall not be found anymore. And the sound of a harpist and musicians and flutists and trumpeters shall not be heard in you anymore. No craftsman of any craft shall be found in you anymore. And the sound of a millstone shall not be found anymore. And the light of a lamp shall not shine in you anymore. And the voice of the bridegroom and the bride shall not be heard in you anymore. For your merchants were the great men of earth. For, catch this, for by your sorcery, your witchcraft, all the nations were deceived. And in her was found the blood of the prophets and the saints and all who were slain on the earth. Now, I want you to notice something here. I want you to capture this. Heaven is not rejoicing in the loss of human life, necessarily. But it's rejoicing that this system that has been deceiving the nations, this witchcraft and sorcery that's been deceiving and taking advantage of people, was destroyed. It's like there's no more deception. There's no more persecution against God's people. It's heaven's rejoicing because it realizes we're almost at the end of all of this. Now, what's interesting is Satan and the Antichrist and the false prophet, they're not a part of this destruction. They're not there when this goes down, but their time is coming, and we'll see that when we get to chapter 19. But I want to close tonight by drawing your attention back to verse 4. It says, and I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, and lest you receive of her plagues. For her sins have reached to heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. I think this is a word for us to consider tonight. You You see, God knows the world that we're living in right now. He knows that we are living in a Babylonian culture. He knows what you are surrounded by. But understand, his heart is that you wouldn't become a part of it. So he says, come out. Paul wrote, come out from among them and be ye separate, says the Lord. Come out from among them, lest you share in their sins. And you know, there are some people that love to live one foot in the Lord and one foot in the world. They love to straddle that fence. But you know what? That is the most miserable way to live. Because you've got too much of the Lord to really enjoy the world. You're convicted by the Holy Spirit all the time. But you've got too much of the world to really enjoy the Lord. So you're always feeling condemned all the time. It's the most horrible way to live. But a lot of professing Christians live that way. And I'm seeing it like never before. And a time when we should be, and here's what's crazy, okay? Do you realize the line has moved? When we talk about compromise and that type of thing, I mean, when we go back into the early 80s when I was, a young man and a Christian, the line of compromise, it was like way over here. If you go back even further, where my buddy Vern, when he was a young man, it was way over here. This is where the line was. But now the line has moved way over here. And the things that people are allowing, into their lives. And there's still people that in the 80s were trying to straddle it here, but now the line is moving. They're still trying to straddle it over here. Does that make sense to me? What I'm saying? It's crazy. And it's like that analogy of the frog in the kettle, where the water's slowly getting turned up and the frog just stays in it because it feels like a jacuzzi until it gets fried. And that's where a lot of us are at. John said this, the Apostle John, do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world is passing away, and the lust of it. But he who does the will of God abides forever. Our world promotes sin. And the more that you're in it, the more that you struggle with it. And here's the thing, sin always reaps consequences. The Bible talks about the law of sowing and reaping. If you sow to the flesh, it says you're going to reap corruption. And knowing this, God wants us to check our hearts. That we're living in this system that is seeking to weaken our resolve through temptation. And we experience the tension of that. But listen to me, friends. Compromise doesn't lessen the tension. That's a false thing that we believe. We think that, I just am feeling this struggle and this tension. I'm going to just give in, and that's going to lessen the tension. No, it doesn't lessen the tension. It only weakens your resolve. And when you compromise one time, it's a lot easier to compromise a second time. And a second time, a third and fourth time. When Daniel and his friends were carted off to Babylon and they were faced with a decision to compromise, they made a decision. And this was their decision. They said that we're not going to defile ourselves. That it says they purposed in their heart to not defile themselves. They purposed in their heart. Say that with me. They purposed in their heart. Say it again. They purposed in their heart to not defile themselves. What does that look like practically? Real quick, I'll give you 2 verses. Here's a picture. Paul wrote this in Romans 12. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service or reasonable worship. It's daily coming to the Lord and saying, my life is not my own. My life belongs to you. putting myself as a living sacrifice. And then he said this, and do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable will of God. It's getting into this book and allowing this book to get into you. It's getting into this book and having your mind renewed as you study it, as you meditate upon it. We can't get away from that. The Word of God is living and powerful, and it molds us and it shapes us, and it don't, please, don't get away from a personal time of you studying the Word of God together. Here's another verse, though, and I'll close with this. You know this verse, 2 Timothy 2:22. It says, flee also youthful lust. How many of you have heard that before? Flee also youthful lust. Okay, we know that. Why does Paul call it youthful lust? Well, listen. Paul was referring to the strong, uncontrolled desires that are characteristic of young and immature people, but can continue through our whole lives if we're not yielded to the Holy Spirit. It's those desires for sexual pleasure. It's the desire for money. It's the desire to cut corners, to get ahead. It's the desire for attention and recognition. All of that is youthful lust. And Paul's exhortation is flee. And I love the Greek word for flee. It's the word in the Greek fugo. And I love it because it always makes me think, full go, like run. Don't play around with this. Just get out of here. So we know that exhortation, flee also youthful lust. And we probably also know the second part of the verse. He says, but pursue righteousness, faith, and love, and peace. So the idea there, listen to me, listen. I know I'm going almost a little long, but 2 more minutes. Listen, this is important. In order to flee youthful lust, you need to be running towards something. You see, if you just flee youthful lust and you're not running toward anything, you're just going to run in a circle and wind right back up at that same place. So he says, but pursue righteousness, faith, love, peace. We know that, but here's the part of the verse we often ignore or forget. He says, but pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace with those who call on the Lord out of a pure heart. The idea is this: we don't do this alone, my friends. We don't do the Christian life alone. We do it in community. We do it with brothers and sisters who are going to hold us accountable. We do it with brothers and sisters who are going to run together. I think one of the greatest things that we can ever experience is when we can link arms with other men and link arms with other women, and we're running together. And I want to encourage you, find people that are going to run hard with you. That word pursue means to run after something like you want to catch it. And find people in your sphere of influence, in your friend group, and maybe God's going to call you to be the one that sets the standard. Maybe he's calling you to say, I think we've been kind of compromising a little bit here, and I don't think we should do that anymore. And he's going to call you. Sometimes it only takes one. When I was in college, some of you have heard me share this before, and I will end with this. But a group of me and my friends who all love the Lord, but I would say we weren't, I would say this, that Jesus was a part of our life, but he wasn't the center of our life. And we went out, we would go to church on Wednesday nights, and then after church we'd go to some restaurant together. There'd be like 10 or 12 of us. So we're at Coco's there in Santa Ana by Calvary Costa Mesa. 10 of us sitting at a table, and 5 guys, 5 girls, or a little mixture. And what are we talking about? We're talking about the surf. How was the surf today? We're talking about the Angels and the Dodgers, the Lakers, how the teams were going to be. The guys are talking about girls that they're interested in. The girls are talking about shopping and fashion, and guys that they're interested in. And this is our conversation around the table right after church. And I was sitting there, and there was another large group that was in the restaurant at the same time, about our age, maybe in their early 20s. And the only thing that was different about the two tables was they were drinking alcohol at their table. But I'm sitting there, and I'm just kind of taking in everything that's happening, and I'm just listening to the conversation at this other table. And what are they talking about? Talking about the Lakers, the Dodgers, the Angels, talking about the surf, talking about girls, talking about cars, talking about fashion, talking about shopping. And I'm sitting there, I'm thinking the only thing different between this table and that table is they're drinking alcohol and they're dropping a few cuss words. And I said to my friends, I said, hey. I've been listening to these guys over here. I've been listening to us. And I realized there's no difference between our table and that table. And I think there should be. I said, we just came from an amazing Bible study, an amazing time of worship. And it's like we just left that all at church. And here we are, we're sitting here and we're just, like I said, I think we need to start. Like we should come out of that, what we just came from, and be talking about how did that minister to you? What impact did that have on your life? And I wasn't like the leader of the group, but it was a moment. And it took a little bit of like faith. Like, are they going to think I'm nuts? Are they going to, make fun of me? Like, oh, you're being over spiritual, Salvato, They didn't. They received it. And it changed the whole trajectory of our friendship and our focus. And I can say out of a whole friend group that even went beyond that, several of those guys ended up, like myself, getting called into full-time ministry. And most of them today are still running hard for Jesus. But it was that one little moment that just changed the whole trajectory of our focus. And maybe God wants to use you in your friend group in that way. Amen?